All right, this will be the first part of the Wagon project for 2023. So what you should see here on Classroom is access to the Wagon zip file. So if you're just opening this for the first time, you need to make sure that you click on it, and do the three dots for opening a new window. And then you will have the option to download that by clicking here. And then once you have it downloaded, you need to make sure you click on it. It will expand into a folder, which is currently improperly named, but it's okay. It says P2 Wagon instead of P1, but that's okay. And then you will see in there 3 pictures and the Maya file. So you can go ahead and double click this and open up the Maya file. And then this is what you should see at the start: the green grass, as well as our reference photos. So the third photo that I've given you in this project folder is this picture of the Wagon chassis that we will be using instead of the one that is on the reference photos. So as I was saying a second ago before I started recording, we're going to be making the chassis first, and then we'll add in our second part the covering. The reference photos that are currently in the scene are just so that we can make our chassis to the right size, length, and width to match up with the size of the covering we're trying to make. So, but in general, we're trying to make this design of a chassis, and which, just pointing out the specifics of it, it's made out of several long rectangles, so we can make those out of cubes. A lot of rectangles and cubes, cubes turned into rectangles, just duplicated all over the place. So rather than having, again, looking at, this is the reference photos. If you tried to build the Wagon according to the reference photos, right, you got to have all these things to be slanted, all of this fancy stuff here, and same with the side view. So we're not doing that. We're making this simple, as I've called it, the Wagoon. So we are going to make our simple chassis, as I said, out of a couple of cubes. So I'm going to pause the recording real quick so that you can think about how would you make this. All right, thank you for your patience. So our little pop quiz, this is just a bunch of boards, right? So we can make one big long board, we can duplicate it, we can make it a longer board, then we can make those 3 boards, we can duplicate those and put another set of those 3 boards on the other side. And then we just need 6 little short boards and 1 extra little short board for 7, and then a big plank to put it on. And then I didn't count the chair, but you can make the chair out of 1, 2, 3, 4 planks, right? So this is just a bunch of flat planks of wood that we're gonna snap together as if they were actually being, nailed together. So I'm going to start with a simple cube. And I will go into my side view for starters, using my space bar. And like I said, the pictures here are only to help us line up and figure out the length of our object as it needs to be. So I'm going to scale this out until, the front is now lined up with the front of my reference photo here, right, where our covering would end. Still not long enough in this direction, so I don't necessarily want to just scale this and eyeball it and move it. What I want to do is instead just actually take the vertices from the back. So again, I'm switched into my vertex selection mode, click and drag a box over all of these, and then move them back to line up with the back. Now, that brings me to another important point about today and working in these side views, is that people will have a tendency, if I undo what I just did, to click on these, right? Or let's do it like this. So click on these, right, and select them, and then move them. And that might look good in this view. If I go into my perspective view, you'll see, hey, I didn't grab these ones. Uh-oh. So again, that's why when you see me working today, you're going to see me clicking and dragging a selection box over that, because by doing so, I will make sure I get both the front vertices and the back vertices as well as, the left and the right. So I'm getting all 4 of them, right? So anyway, just with those selected, I'm just going to move those vertices back. And then I can go back into object mode. My pivot point's not in the center anymore. That's not a big deal. If it bothers you, you can go to modify center pivot and it will figure it out. But otherwise, that's okay. So now that it's lined up, if I go into my front view now, I can see that my object is still a little too thick. So I'll thin out my board a little bit. And then again, we're just using the reference photos to align where the edges of our wagon should be. So now with that made, if I go into my perspective view, you can see my single floating board, right? And then I have board number 1, and now I need board number 2, and then I'll edit board number 3 to be a little longer and to have this slant. So for starters, I'm going to go into my side view again, Command D to duplicate, move this down, Command D to duplicate another time, move this down. I'm just leaving a tiny little bit of gap between them because I can. And then now we need to make a decision. Well, actually I don't. Positive Z is this way. So I need to infer my decision. So the front is this way. So I want to make the front a little longer, right? So if we look at my little scoop here, right, there's this spot where you can put your feet that sticks out of the front, right, with our little seat here, and then your feet would rest here. So we need to, 1, make this longer out in front, and then 2, we need to affect this little slant on the front. So knowing what we just did with selecting the vertices, second verse same as the first, we will now select these vertices and pull them forward to make this object longer again. And then looking at this, we said that it needs to be slanted. So what people will have a tendency to do, and this is the mistake, don't do this, is they'll select these, or they'll already have them selected, and they'll be like, and then I need them slanted, right? And then they'll rotate this. But you can see how that tapers this board as it arrives at those vertices. So no, we're not rotating. We're just moving. Again, click and drag over these vertices so you get both. And we're just moving these forward slightly to create that little slant. Right? So now in object mode, if I go into my perspective view, you can see that I have these so far. So there's 3 cubes stretched and shaped into being 3 boards. Now, just for sake of noting, I just made a cylinder for no reason. I have built this scene such that the pictures are lined up where they need to be to align with the scene's natural axis of symmetry, which would be at the origin of the grid, right? So the very center of the grid. That's the axis of symmetry upon which that I set things up for this. So I bring that up because, as we did with the stick figure guy that we put together in the training wheel rig project, if we have an axis of symmetry, we can flip across it pretty easy if we know what we're doing. So if I want to duplicate these boards and make sure they flip symmetrically to the other side very easily, certainly I could duplicate these and just move them over, sure, but then we're just eyeballing things, right? So instead, when we do this, remember we used groups to flip across the axis of symmetry. So first I would duplicate them. I want those duplicates to go into a brand new group, and so with that group made, let me come back into the perspective view so you can see. Again, as I was saying last week, the new groups have their axis, their pivot point is set naturally at the origin by default, which for our purposes means that a new group is created at the axis of symmetry. So that means it's very simple for us to look at this new group, figure out that the direction we want to flip is the red direction, which we know is the x-axis because they are color-coded. So that means if this is currently in its positive 1 x scale location, that the inverse would be negative 1 and therefore flipped. And so now I have both sides symmetrically flipped. When you could look in my front view, you can see it's lined up pretty good. So now that brings us to the boards that run the other direction. And so this is where I want to point out, again, looking at the construction history that we have in the picture, it tells us everything that we need to know about how we want to make these. So you can tell from the nail holes on the outside that the boards in the middle are the ones that are bookended or nailed in between the outsides. So when I duplicate this board, when I come back in here and I duplicate this board, right, and I rotate it 90 degrees, I can scale it down. So this is where the what do you call it? Center pivot being accurate might help. Okay. Oh, it's off center anyway. Okay, it doesn't matter. So anyway, when I bring this in, I want to scale this to be inside of these boards, right? And then because I use scale, it didn't quite get it perfectly, so then I just need to go into vertex mode, grab these, bring these in as well, just inside. Boom. Let me go into my side view and bring this back. Now, if you use your wireframe mode view, as we talked about the other day, right, you can line these up pretty well. Although I will point out, with us having textures in this file, if you press 5, as I told you the other day, 5 is just any color shading that might be added. It does not display textures. So if you break your textures by going into wireframe mode, you want to hit the number 6. So 6 will display shading with textures. So 4 is to look through things, 5 is just simple colors, 6 includes textures as well. So with that done, boom, I got this lined up. Okay, great. Back to what I was doing, wireframe mode back on. Duplicate, bring it down, duplicate, whoops, bring it down, and then there's no easy trick for just flipping them over here, so we'll just do it the old-fashioned way. Select all 3 with shift, duplicate, and come back over here. Line those up. That looks good. And then we'll worry about the front one in a second. So that's all good. Oh, we already did this board. Okay, cool. So then I will duplicate this one now. And I, again, will bring that forward. So we're lining up the bottom of this, right? So we'll line up the bottom. And then again, if we look at this, there is a slant. Now, again, people will think, oh, boom, I rotate this board. Got it. No. It has a flat top and a flat bottom. The board is cut at a slant. So instead, it's similar to what we were doing earlier. Back to vertex mode. Grab these vertices that are making up the top. And then when you move these, they'll keep everything lined up. So now, if I go back into perspective view, I got this. And then now, if you take a look, for the base, if we look at the base of our wagon, you'll see that there's this little lip that runs around the outside of the wagon a little bit, but not in the front, right? So it entirely covers the bottom of the wagon, goes out a little bit on the left, right, and back, but not in the front. So I'm going to make a new cube. and just lift that up. Go into my side view, and I'm just gonna press 6 to bring my textures back. Make this nice and flat. Make this very long. Okay. Go into my front view. Make this very wide. And then, this doesn't matter either way. I'll bring it up so that it's touching the bottom. And then the key in my top view is that the length, like hanging off the back, should be the same width as that hanging off the side. Bless you. And but then once we have that all set, we just need to get this moved back slightly. So as you'll see, there's still a little bit of overhang here. So I can grab the vertices up here and move these back till it's flush in the front. And now I have my little boat, my chassis. All right, so I'm gonna take a quick 2-minute pause here in the video. It will be seamless, but I'm gonna take a quick pause. All right, so back in the saddle. So this part, fairly straightforward, right? So the next part, we are going to construct our wheel first, and then we'll construct some supports to attach that to. So first we're going to start making one of these simple wagon wheels. So our wagon wheel has a center, right? There's a disc in the center. It has its 8 spokes sticking out, or 4 spokes. You'll see what I mean in a second. So it's got its 4 spokes sticking out, and then a nice thin ring around the outside that serves as the wheel. So, and I highlight the word ring because a ring, or the ring is like a pipe, and we have our pipe under our special primitives. So if you right click that and click pipe, you will get one of these. It's basically just a cylinder with a hole punched out. And so with this, we'll want to do that thing where we can change the value of a channel. You can, type in the number that I come up with. I think I get to 0.03. But again, holding down Control, selecting the word thickness, and pressing down the middle mouse button, I can gently control the thickness. So I guess 0.04, 0.03, they're all going to work good. And if I lift this up, you'll see it's still a little too wide. So I'll do that. And that looks like about the right width for these. Now, one of the main things that we are going to want to make sure happens with this when we make it is that the spokes in the center of the wheel are all in the same spot. And so to do that, I am going to use my snap modifiers, but this time we're not going to move the pivot point. We're going to be happy with the pivot point in the center as it is. But I am going to hold down V as in vertex to snap this to the very corner of my wagon. And I'm going to use this corner vertex as my point around which I'm going to unitize everything. So now I can go ahead and grab a cylinder, and I'll again bring this forward. I'll just bring this up so you can see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it very small, and then I'll make it pretty long, and then I'll make it pretty small again. Okay, and I'm trying to fit, this will be my spoke in here. So I'm going to start by putting this on its side, rotate it 90 degrees. And then again, like I was saying, the pivot point is in the center of this object still, and I want them to be unified around the same center point. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. Hold down V as in vertex, grab the center dot, snap it to that center, or that vertice that I've decided is my center. Now I can scale this down so that the ends of my cylinder are hidden inside the pipe. And then now what I can do is duplicate this another 3 times in a row. But first, so duplicate once, rotate X. Yep, rotate X 45 degrees. And then I'll make another duplicate. Oh, whoops. Duplicate 90. Duplicate 135. Boom. So now I have my 4 spokes. That looks like 8. Now I just need to put that little center cap on. So again, another cylinder. No need to overthink it. Pull it up, make a little tiny disc. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did, which is use the center of the manipulator, snap it to this vertex over here, zoom in and make sure that it's snapped to the correct vertex. And it looks like it is, but it also looks like my disc is not thick enough for the spokes. So I'll just make this a little thicker. And boom, there we have it. There's my wagon wheel. So now I want to make these all stay together. So unlike last week when we were doing this, we were using groups. But for this, we want these things to stay together going forward. We want this wheel to act as one big thing. So I'm going to select all those objects, go to Mesh, and Combine. And so now there'll be one big object. Cool. All right, I'll come back to that in a second. Let's build that little spoke structure, or excuse me, support structure with the axles. So if we look at it, it's a pretty simple structure. There's some little half circles that serve as the shocks, for sake of saying, that's what they're supposed to be. And then there's just a single axle running left or right across the body. So to make the little, what do you call it, shock here, we're going to grab another pipe. And we'll do pretty much the exact same thing we did before. First, we'll make it pretty skinny. So, I don't know, I'll do 0.05. Sure, it's fine. Cool. Make this a little thinner. And we'll rotate this on its side. So I just tilted it 90 degrees, boom. And what I'll do now is I'll lift this up a little bit and go into my, oh, I see. I want to be in my side view. Okay, rotate this 90 degrees on the Y then. Okay, cool. And then we're going to go into face mode, bless you, and delete all the faces on the top side of this, giving us just the half circle. And now here's where I will point out that the pivot point staying where it's at is a good thing, because now we can scale this object towards the middle point there, and it just sort of squishes this into the shape, that the oval shape that this is in. So now I can just go ahead and line this up, boom, and boom, something like that. It seems good. Go into my front view. It's in the middle right now, but put it on the side. And then I'm going to duplicate it. I'm not super picky about this part, so I'm just going to drag it over there. You can flip it symmetrically if you're really serious about it. And then now I just need to grab one more cylinder. Do the same thing. So I'll put it on its side. And I'm going to make it small, long, small, long. Then go into my front view, and I'll lift this up and scale it in. Make sure it's not too wide. All right, cool. And now I got something I can stick my wheels to. So I can take this, I can take this natural pivot point here, and I can stick it onto the outside of this. Same thing as when we were doing the pivot points last week. You can always turn on the wireframe mode to see through things to make sure you get it to the right spot. So I want to drag this to there. That looks good. 6 today, folks, as a reminder, right? So then I can flip this up 90 degrees, boom. And then please, oh, I did this before I moved it into position. Okay, my bad. I'm gonna leave the wheel here off to the side. Whoopsie. It helps when you get the axle aligned with the actual supports it's supposed to be connected to. And then you do what I was saying. So then now I'll again snap this vertex to here. 4 for the wireframe mode. Make sure I get it snapped onto the right point. 6 to display. And then please, folks, make sure that you do not leave the little sad tiny wheels on there. Please try and scale them up. They don't need to be so big that they go through the ground, because I realize that that can be like comically large on your wagon. But, you know, make them look appropriately sized. You can, when you're done, combine the whole wagon and make it touch the ground if it bothers you that much. Doesn't bother me. But yeah, so boom, I got that on there. Same thing for the other side, right? So I can duplicate this, and I can just simply snap this on over here, and we'll rotate around. Same thing. Let's go into wireframe mode. Make sure it gets to the right point. Boom. All right, 6 again. And then now, with all of these things, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We will combine these again, because this thing ain't moving. So combine, duplicate, go into my side view. We'll push this back to like right there. And then now I got a wagon with wheels. And that's part 1. So part 2, we will put a covering on it. All right, cool. Thank you, folks. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.